In October of 1972, on a 240-acre flat black-loam wheat farm 3 miles outside Casselton, North Dakota, in the Red River Valley, a 32-year-old widow named Eliza Vogeler paid $480 in cash for 4 heritage Percheron-Belgian draft horses from an elderly Stearns County Minnesota breeder named Augustin Brouwer, who had been carrying the foundation lines of a working Percheron-Belgian team continuously since 1948 on a small farm outside Cold Spring. The 4 heritage draft horses were the working surplus from Augustin Brouwer's autumn 1972 herd assessment. Augustin Brouwer had offered them to Eliza Vogeler on the morning of the second Saturday of October 1972 at a price of $140 for the lead Percheron-Gelding captain, $120 for the second Percheron mare Bess, $120 for the Belgian gelding Duke, and $100 for the Belgian mare Bertha. Eliza Vogeler had paid in cash, in a folded brown paper envelope she had been keeping in a tin coffee canister on the kitchen shelf since the spring of 1971, when her husband Marcus Vogler had been killed at 38 by a Massey Harris tractor power takeoff entanglement accident on the upper southwest section of the home wheat field. The 4 heritage draft horses stood on the afternoon of October 14, 1972, in the back of a borrowed 2-axle stock trailer hitched to her 1966 Ford F250 pickup truck. The lead horse, the 7-year-old Percheron gelding captain, was 17.5 hands at the shoulder. The largest of the 4 was the Belgian gelding Duke at 18 hands. The smallest of the 4 was the Belgian mare Bertha at 16.75 hands. They were, by every measurable standard the Red River Valley commercial wheat industry used in 1972, the wrong animals for a working 240-acre commercial wheat operation. The men at the Casselton Cafe laughed for an hour and 50 minutes when they heard. They were still laughing 6 years and 6 months later, on the morning of April 15, 1979, when the United States Department of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service in Fargo released an emergency advisory bulletin confirming that the standard April 15th opening of the Red River Valley spring wheat planting window was being missed across an estimated 68% of Cass County commercial wheat operations because the on-farm diesel tractor parts supply for the dominant 1960s-era International Harvester and Alice Chalmers and John Deere fleets had collapsed across the upper Midwest in the wake of the January 1979 Iranian Revolution oil shock and the ongoing International Harvester corporate financial crisis. By the autumn of 1972, the agricultural orthodoxy of the American commercial Red River Valley wheat industry had reached the cleanest expression of its 40-year arc. The orthodoxy was simple. Commercial Red River Valley wheat operations produced hard red spring wheat for the Minneapolis Grain Exchange and the regional Cargill and Continental Grain milling network on a diesel tractor traction protocol that had progressively replaced draft horses across the upper Midwest between approximately 1936 and 1955. The accepted commercial tractor brands in 1972 were, in this order, International Harvester for the dominant 53% of Red River Valley acreage, John Deere for the second-largest market share at approximately 28%, Alice Chalmers and Massey Ferguson for the remaining smaller share, and the small new entrants, Case and Ford, running the long tail of the market. The standard commercial Red River Valley wheat operation in 1972 ran a fleet of 1 to 3 diesel tractors in the 80 to 120 horsepower range, a 4-bottom or 6-bottom or 8-bottom diesel-pulled moldboard plow, a tractor-pulled press drill seed drill, a self-propelled combine for harvest, and a small fleet of grain trucks for hauling to the elevator. The working draft horses that had pulled the Red River Valley wheat economy from approximately 1882 through approximately 1948 had been reduced to county fair show animals and Saturday evening pleasure driving turnouts on small farms. They were, in the professional consensus of every commercial wheat operator in Cass County, an obsolete agricultural technology that the modern diesel tractor traction and implement revolution had rendered economically uncompetitive. The North Dakota State University Cooperative Extension Service in 1972, run for Cass County by a single agricultural engineer named Howard Pemberton, who had served in the office for 17 years, said it openly to anyone who would listen. He said it standing at the front of the Cass County Wheat Growers Association meeting. He said it sitting at the counter of the Casselton Cafe at 7 in the morning. He said, working draft horses on a commercial Red River Valley wheat operation in 1972 are a turn-of-the-century practice. They are not a modern commercial protocol. The Vogler widow has decided to honor her grandfather, Augustin Vogler, who carried a Saxon draft horse breeding tradition into Stearns County, Minnesota in 1882. Nobody should mistake the gesture for a business decision. It was not a controversial position. It was the professional consensus of the North Dakota State University Agricultural Engineering Department, of the Red River Valley Wheat Growers Association, of every commercial wheat operator between Fargo and Grand Forks. It was the consensus that the 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses Eliza Vogeler had bought from Augustin Brower in October of 1972 would either be sold off within 24 months at salvage prices to a hobby breeder, or would slowly transition into a pleasure-driving show team that would never generate working farm income while her 240 acres of hard red spring wheat sat unplowed in the spring and unharvested in the autumn. Eliza Vogeler had been raised on a different consensus. Her grandfather, Augustin Vogler, had been born in 1862 in the village of Großenhain, in the Kingdom of Saxony, in central Germany, on a small Saxon farm where the Vogler family had been breeding working Percheron-Belgian crossbred draft teams continuously since 1848 under the Saxon agricultural tradition that valued the 4-horse team as the operational backbone of the family farm. Augustin Vogler had emigrated west across the Atlantic to Stearns County, Minnesota. In the spring of 1882, at the age of 20, as part of the Saxon-American migration into central Minnesota that followed the 1878 Great Northern Railway extension into the upper Midwest. He had married a fellow Saxon immigrant named Matilda Huber in 1884. He had brought with him, in a small carved oak box bound with hemp twine, a hand-bound 1873 Saxon agricultural manual titled Pferdezucht und Pflug, meaning horse breeding and the plow, containing 192 pages of traditional Saxon draft horse training protocol in handwritten Sütterlin-German script, 23 hand-drawn anatomical diagrams of the working draft horse harness fit, and the 4-bottom moldboard plow geometry, a handwritten grandfather's appendix in faded brown ink in Augustine's own grandfather Wenzel Vogler's hand that documented 46 years of draft horse breeding records at the Großenhain family farm between 1827 and 1873, and a single sentence he would repeat to his son Wilhelm Vogler, and that Wilhelm would later repeat to his daughter Eliza on the kitchen porch of the Cass County Vogler home place from the time Eliza was 4 years old. Granddaughter, when the diesel tractor parts run out, the day will come when our family will need the four-horse team again. Augustine Vogler had died in 1947 at the age of 85. His agricultural manual, his hand-drawn diagrams, and his grandfather's breeding appendix had passed to Eliza's father, Wilhelm Vogler, who had reluctantly switched the Vogler operation from a working draft horse team to a 1962 Massey Harris 44 diesel tractor in the autumn of 1965 under pressure from the rising 1960s wheat acreage scale that the Red River Valley diesel tractor revolution had forced on the smaller upper Midwest operations. Wilhelm Vogler had died on the morning of April 19, 1971, at the age of 67, when the Massey Harris 44's power takeoff shaft caught his denim chore coat during a routine field cultivator adjustment in the upper southwest section of the home wheat field. The agricultural manual had passed to Eliza in the autumn of 1971, along with the operational responsibility for the 240-acre Vogler home place. She had read the manual 3 times in the winter of 1971 to 1972. She had been 31 years old. She had been widowed since April of 1971. She had been raising her son Theodore, 10 years old in the autumn of 1972, and managing the home place with the help of a part-time hired man named Henry Bauernfeld for 18 consecutive months before she decided what her grandfather Augustine had been writing in the 1873 Saxon Agricultural Manual for 35 years. The diesel tractor traction protocol was building its own collapse. By the summer of 1972, she had decided that she would acquire the 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses. She had told no one in Cass County what she was planning. By the morning of the 3rd Sunday of October 1972, when Lyle Schoenfeld drove past the Vogler farm on his way home from the Casselton Trinity Lutheran Church and saw 4 working Percheron-Belgian draft horses grazing in the south pasture above the Vogler barn, the entire county had something new to talk about. By the 2nd Tuesday of November 1972, every commercial wheat operator in Cass County had heard. The Casselton Cafe sat on Highway 10 between the Casselton State Bank and the Casselton Town Hall, and on Tuesday and Friday mornings between 5:30 and 7, the long Formica counter filled with men in faded red International Harvester ball caps and red plaid hunting caps, drinking coffee from chipped enamel mugs and arguing about the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, spring wheat prices, and the prospects for the upcoming spring planting weather window, and the question of whether the new federal grain reserve standards rumored for the 1979 season would shift the Red River Valley wheat economy. The Vogler widows' draft horses had become the dominant topic of conversation. By the 2nd week of November, Lyle Schoenfeld had told the story at the counter 4 mornings in a row. He had told it again at the November Red River Valley Wheat Growers Association meeting. He had told it once more at the Trinity Lutheran Church coffee hour on the second Sunday of November. By the end of November, he had told it in some form to every commercial wheat operator within 40 miles of Casselton. The story changed slightly with each telling. The mockery in Casselton was not cruel. It was a kind of small-town disbelief that wore the clothing of concern. At the implement dealer on Wednesday afternoon, Eliza heard a man named Otto Brower, who had bought heritage wheat seed off her father Wilhelm Vogler in the 1950s, tell another customer that the Vogler widow had let her grief get the better of her judgment. At the Casselton State Bank on the Saturday before Thanksgiving, the bank manager pulled Eliza aside after she had finished a routine deposit and asked her, in a low and respectful voice, whether she had thought through what the per-acre traction cost of a 4-horse team versus a 100-horsepower diesel tractor was going to do to her household budget over the next 5 years. At the Trinity Lutheran Church potluck on the third Sunday of November, the minister's wife pulled Eliza aside in the basement fellowship hall and asked her in a careful voice whether the draft horses were something Marcus would have approved of. Eliza had looked at the minister's wife across the corner of a folding card table that held a covered casserole and a glass pan of German apple kuchen, and had said, "Marcus would have asked me what my grandfather thought." The minister's wife had said nothing. Eliza had carried her green bean casserole back to the kitchen and washed her own dish. The mockery did not stay in Casselton. By the second week of November, the story had traveled in the way all Red River Valley news traveled in 1972, by way of 3-cent newspaper classifieds and implement dealer counter-conversation and a single Casselton State Bank teller who lived in Fargo and rode the morning bus past the Vogler farm on her way to work. By the third week of November, the story had reached the offices of the North Dakota Department of Agriculture in Bismarck, where a junior agricultural economic staffer named Cornelius Tisdale filed a single-typed memorandum into the Cass County Wheat Operations folder, noting that the registered widow of the late Marcus Vogler had moved a 240-acre commercial Red River Valley wheat operation onto an unrecognized 4-horse traction program, and recommending that the file be reviewed again in 18 months for what he described in the memorandum as a likely operational failure or voluntary sale. The memorandum sat in a tan manila folder on a metal filing cabinet on the 4th floor of the North Dakota State Capitol Annex in Bismarck for the next 7 years. Cornelius Tisdale was promoted to senior agricultural economic staffer in 1977 and did not pull the file again until May of 1979, 4 weeks after the spring planting window opened and the Red River Valley International Harvester Part Supply collapse became the operational news of the season. He removed the 1972 memorandum, stapled it to the front of a newly typed summary of the Vogler operations untouched planting schedule and the just-signed Norse Seed Cooperative custom plowing contract. Walked the file to the State Commissioner of Agriculture's office and left it on the commissioner's desk with a yellow post-it note that said, in his small, careful handwriting, "I was wrong. The commissioner was wrong. Read this." The commissioner read it. The 1980 North Dakota Department of Agriculture annual report carried a 6-page case study on the Vogler operation under the heading, "The 4-horse team that plowed through the crisis." The case study was written by Cornelius Tisdale. It is still in the North Dakota Department of Agriculture archive in Bismarck. Lyle Schoenfeld was 58 years old in the autumn of 1972. He was stocky and barrel-chested. His face had gone ruddy from decades of working open-cab diesel tractors across the flat Red River Valley horizon. His brown and gray stubble flecked his cheeks and jaw. His deep-set hazel eyes were squinted from years of staring across the flat horizon. He wore a faded red International Harvester ball cap with a stained brim and a small embroidered IH logo, a faded blue denim chore jacket over a tan and brown plaid flannel shirt, dark blue Wrangler jeans softened by years of washes, and scuffed knee-high brown leather lace-up plowman's boots. His mouth had the paternalistic, worried set of a man who had spent his whole life believing he was responsible for other people's decisions. He had wanted the Vogler 240 acres before Marcus died. He had wanted it more after. He had approached the subject sideways for 1 year. He had stopped by on Sunday afternoons. He had brought hot dish casseroles his wife Eleonora made. He had told her more than once that any decision she wanted to make about the operation would have his full support. The draft horses changed the conversation. Lyle heard about them from his hired man Stanley Goodnight, who had been at the Augustin Brower dispersal on the second Saturday of October, 1972, and had watched Eliza pay in cash. Stanley had told Lyle at the implement dealer on the Monday morning. Lyle had not believed him. Lyle had driven past the Vogler farm himself on the Tuesday afternoon and had counted, by the rough estimate of a man who had run a commercial 640-acre diesel tractor wheat operation for 26 years, 4 unmistakably working Percheron-Belgian draft horses grazing in the south pasture. Lyle had driven home to his wife Eleonora at 6 in the evening and had sat at the kitchen table with his cap off and his elbows on the oilcloth and had said, "Eleonora, my neighbor's widow, has lost her mind." Eleonora Schoenfeld had set down a coffee pot and had said, "Lyle, you do not call her that ever again. She is Marcus's widow, and she is your godson's mother, and she is 32 years old, and she has buried a husband and her father and is running the home place by herself. You will go over there tomorrow, and you will ask her what she has done, and you will listen to the answer." Lyle Schoenfeld had gone over the next morning. Eliza was standing in the south pasture beside the lead Percheron gelding captain with a small leather tally book in her left hand and a pencil in her right when she heard Lyle Schoenfeld's truck pull up to the lane. She did not turn around. She finished the entry she was writing. She closed the tally book. She walked across the freshly mown alfalfa stubble to the gate. "Lyle, Eliza, you want coffee?" No. She had expected the visit, although not on this particular Wednesday. She crossed her arms. She waited. "Stanley told me yesterday," Lyle said. "I came over today. I drove past the south pasture yesterday, and I counted 4 working Percheron-Belgian draft horses grazing alongside the property fence. I came home, and I asked Eleonora to set me straight. Eleonora told me to come ask you, 'Eliza, what in God's name have you done?' I bought 4 heritage Percheron-Belgian draft horses from Augustin Brower's Cold Spring operation on Saturday. 2 Percherons and 2 Belgians, 3 geldings and 1 mare. I paid $480 in cash. They are going to be the foundation of a working 4-horse team replacing the Massey Harris on the home place. I am restoring my grandfather Augustin's 1888 4-bottom horse-drawn moldboard plow and the 1894 hand-restored horse-drawn grain drill in the upper barn over the winter. I am putting the Massey Harris on consignment at the Fargo Equipment Auction in March. I am running the entire 240 acres on the 4-horse team, starting with the spring 1973 planting. Eliza, Lyle. You cannot run a commercial Red River Valley wheat operation on draft horses in 1972. The North Dakota State University Agricultural Engineering Department has no published commercial production data on a 4-horse traction protocol on 240 acres of hard red spring wheat in the Red River Valley. The Red River Valley Wheat Growers Association has no working subcommittee on draft horse traction. The Minneapolis Grain Exchange wants standard wheat at standard yields and standard volume. You are going to be sitting on a 4-horse team you cannot scale, and 240 acres you cannot plant. By the spring of 1974, you are going to be selling the 4 horses at salvage prices to a hobby breeder, and you are going to be coming to me to ask if I will buy the home place when it happens. Eliza, Lyle. My grandfather wrote in 1873 that the day would come when the diesel tractor parts would run out on the upper Midwest, and that the only operations standing would be the ones that had kept the 4-horse team. The day is closer than you think. The International Harvester corporate financial position is going to crack open inside 7 years. The Iranian-Saudi oil price coordination is going to crack open inside 7 years. When both crack open in the same growing season, the only operations in this valley that are going to be able to plant on the standard April 15th window are the ones that do not depend on diesel and the ones that do not depend on an out-of-state part supply chain. I am not going to be sitting on my hands when that happens. I am going to be the only Cass County operator running on the right protocol. I am not asking you to understand this. I am telling you what I am doing, so you do not have to ask me again. Lyle Schoenfeld took his cap off, then put it back on, then took it off again. He looked across the south pasture at the 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses grazing alongside the property fence. He looked back at Eliza. He said, "Eliza, I cannot stop you. I cannot help you. I am going home. I will watch what happens." He drove home. If you have ever kept an animal everybody in your county had decided was an obsolete agricultural technology, if you have ever heard your grandfather's voice in a 1873 Saxon agricultural manual and decided to listen to him over every cooperative extension agent and every commercial wheat operator in your state, this story is for you. Stay with us. There is one of these stories in every county in America, and the one we are telling you today comes from Cass County, North Dakota, in the spring of 1979, 6.5 years after Eliza Vogeler walked 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses off a borrowed stock trailer onto a Red River Valley wheat farm. The years between 1972 and 1979 were the deep work years. They were the years in which Eliza Vogeler did 3 things at the same time. She ran a 240-acre Red River Valley hard red spring wheat operation. She translated a 100-year-old Saxon-German agricultural manual into operational protocol, and she did it while raising a young son alone in a county where the agricultural professional class had decided in advance that her operation would fail. The work was not glamorous. The work was, on the morning of December 8, 1972, the hand-rolling of fresh oat and barley feed rations into 4 hand-built oak feed troughs at 4:30 in the morning in the temperature of -18 degrees Fahrenheit. while 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses waited inside the heated stalls of the upper barn for their pre-dawn working ration. The work was, on the evening of February 11th, 1973, the hand-stitching of a torn left shoulder seam on her faded dark indigo chambray workshirt at the kitchen table by the light of a single overhead bulb after a 16-hour day. The work was, on the morning of April 23, 1973, the kneeling for 2 hours and 35 minutes in fresh straw beside the Belgian mare Bertha to attend her first successful foaling of a single 1,200-pound Belgian Percheron crossbred foal, the first naturally foaled draft horse on the Vogler place in 24 years. The first foaled colt, which Eliza named at 6:47 in the morning when she pulled him to standing on his unsteady legs and held him to the warm light of the dawn, Augustine after her grandfather. The work was, in the autumn of 1973, the careful restoration of her grandfather, Augustine's 1888 four-bottom horse-drawn moldboard plow over the cold winter months in the upper barn workshop, with Henry Bauernfeld working alongside her on every Saturday afternoon and most Sunday afternoons from November of 1972 through March of 1973, hand sharpening the steel moldboard blades, hand replacing the hand-carved oak handles, hand oiling the iron beam frame, and hand replacing the leather harness traces with a fresh hand-cut set from a Stearns County Saxon-American harness maker named Theo Steinmetz, who was the last working draft horse harness maker on a working scale in central Minnesota in 1972. The work was, in the spring of 1974, the careful restoration of her grandfather's 1894 hand-restored horse-drawn grain drill on the same operating shed workshop schedule with the same operating shed crew. The Saxon four-horse traction protocol was, by the spring 1975 planting season, the operational backbone of the Vogler home place. The first 1973 spring planting had come in at 96% on the standard April 15th window. The 1973 harvest had come in at 38 bushels per acre of certified hard red spring wheat against the Cass County commercial average that year of 36. The 1974 spring planting had come in at 98% on schedule. The 1974 harvest had come in at 41 bushels per acre against the commercial average of 38. The 1975 harvest had come in at 43 bushels per acre against the commercial average of 39. The Saxon four-horse traction protocol was producing comparable per-acre yields on a fraction of the operating cost. By the autumn of 1976, Eliza had grown the working team from 4 horses to 6 through 2 consecutive years of natural foaling. By the autumn of 1978, she had grown the working team to 8. By the autumn of 1978, the Saxon four-horse team operation was running at a documented operating cost per acre of approximately $14.90 per planted acre against the commercial Red River Valley, diesel tractor operating cost per acre of approximately $38.20 per planted acre at the prevailing 1978 diesel prices. On a per-acre basis, the Vogler operation was running at 61% below the commercial cost per acre. The math was, by 1978, the kind of math that quietly rearranged how a county thought about a wheat operation. But the county had not yet been told the math, because Eliza Vogeler had not told anybody. She had kept the operating cost ledger in a small green hardback Borum and Pease accounting book on the second shelf of the farmhouse pantry. She had reconciled it on the kitchen table on the third Sunday of every month at 6 in the evening with a sharpened number 2 pencil and a hand-cranked Monroe adding machine her father Wilhelm Vogler had bought for the farm operation in 1954. Henry Bauernfeld had seen the ledger 4 times. Theodore Vogler had seen the ledger twice. Lyle Schoenfeld had not seen the ledger. Nobody at the Casselton State Bank had seen the ledger. The North Dakota Department of Agriculture had not seen the ledger. Eliza Vogeler was, by the autumn of 1978, the lowest per-acre operating cost wheat operator in Cass County, North Dakota. And nobody in Cass County knew it, except the woman who kept the ledger and the part-time hired hand who had been at her side for 7 years. She liked it that way. She told Henry Bauernfeld in October of 1978, sitting on the back step of the farmhouse after evening chores with 2 enamel cups of coffee between them, that she did not want the county to know what the operation was doing because the day was coming when the county would have no choice but to find out. She told him that her grandfather Augustin had written in 1873 that the diesel tractor parts were going to run out on the upper Midwest and that she was going to be ready when it happened. Henry Bauernfeld had set his coffee cup on the step. He had looked at her for a long time. He had said, "Mrs. Vogeler, I have known you for 7 years, and I have not understood you for 7 years, and now I think I am starting to." She had said, "Henry, you have understood me from the morning of October 14th, 1972, when you stood at the end of the borrowed stock trailer and helped me walk 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses off the ramp into the south pasture without telling me I was making a mistake." He had said, "Mrs. Vogler, I knew you were not making a mistake. I just did not know what kind of right you were going to be." She had said, "Henry, neither did I." In the winter of 1976, Eliza received a letter from a researcher at North Dakota State University in Fargo named Dr. Margaret Strand. Dr. Strand was an associate professor of agricultural engineering whose research program focused on alternative traction protocols for upper Midwest grain operations. She had read about the Vogler operation in a brief, unsigned North Dakota Cooperative Extension newsletter article that had described an unnamed Cass County wheat operator running a documented 4-horse traction protocol with measurable per-acre cost of operation reduction. Dr. Strand had written Eliza a letter on January 19, 1976, asking whether Eliza would consent to a multi-year research collaboration. Eliza had answered 4 weeks later. She had said yes. She had said, "Don't use my name." Dr. Margaret Strand kept her promise. She visited the Vogler operation every April, June, and October from 1976 through 1982. She documented the 4-horse traction operating cost per acre, the team grazing rotational pasture management protocol, the field passes per day throughput rates of the 1888 4-bottom horse-drawn moldboard plow against equivalent diesel tractor 4-bottom moldboard plow throughput, and a small-scale traditional traction wheat farm economics. She published, between 1977 and 1982, 5 papers in the Journal of Agricultural Engineering and Sustainable Agriculture Quarterly that referenced the Vogler operation only as Cooperator 5. None of the North Dakota commercial wheat operators identified Cooperator 5 until the spring of 1979. Then the Iranian Revolution oil shock and the international harvester parts supply collapse arrived in the same growing season. The Iranian Revolution had reached its operational climax on the morning of January 16, 1979, when the last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, left Tehran for exile. The Iranian oil exports, which had supplied approximately 7% of total United States crude oil imports through the late 1970s, had been suspended through the political transition of late 1978 and the early Shiite revolutionary government of early 1979. The world spot market price of crude oil rose from approximately $13.50 per barrel in October 1978 to approximately $26 per barrel by the end of March 1979. The United States retail diesel price at the Cass County agricultural pump rose from approximately 58 cents per gallon in January 1978 to approximately 97 cents per gallon by April 1979 to approximately $1.46 per gallon by January 1980. In the same window, the International Harvester Corporation entered the worst financial crisis in its corporate history. The corporation's net financial position had collapsed under the combined weight of falling commercial vehicle sales, rising raw materials costs, a 1979 to 1980 labor strike that idled major manufacturing operations, and the worsening farm credit environment across the upper Midwest. The International Harvester Farm Equipment Parts Distribution Network across the upper Midwest contracted under the corporate financial pressure beginning in February of 1979 and accelerated through March and April. By the morning of April 15, 1979, the standard opening of the Red River Valley spring wheat planting window, approximately 68% of Cass County commercial wheat operations could not field a working planter because their International Harvester or Alice Chalmers or John Deere diesel tractors were missing critical hydraulic seals, transmission bearings, fuel injector components, or PTO assemblies that the regional dealer network could not deliver. Eliza Vogeler's 8 Percheron-Belgian draft horses pulled the family 1888 four-bottom moldboard plow and the 1894 hand-restored horse-drawn grain drill across her 240 acres on the standard Red River Valley spring schedule. She finished the entire 240 acres on the morning of May 4, 1979. Within 4 weeks of finishing her own planting, Eliza Vogeler's farm telephone was ringing every working hour. The first call came on the morning of May 7, 1979, from a Norse Seed Cooperative custom plowing contract manager named Roland Bauer, who had been the Norse Seed Cooperative custom plowing operations manager in Fargo for 19 years. And who had spent the 4 weeks between April 15th and May 7th fielding desperate phone calls from member farmers across Cass and Trail counties who could not get their own tractors running and who needed somebody, anybody, to do their custom plowing for the 1979 season. Roland Bauer had pulled the Vogler operations name out of an old 1976 North Dakota Cooperative Extension newsletter article he had filed under Alternative Traction and had not opened since. He had asked Eliza whether she would consider a custom plowing contract covering 1,800 acres of spring plowing and 1,800 acres of fall plowing per year for the next 5 years at any price she would name. Eliza had told him she would think about it and call him back in the afternoon. She had walked the south pasture for an hour. She had returned to the kitchen telephone. She had told Roland Bauer that she would supply the 1,800 acres of spring plowing and the 1,800 acres of fall plowing at $42 per acre with a 5-year exclusive arrangement, and that she would not accept the contract unless the North Seed Cooperative agreed in writing to a fixed 5-year price independent of any future diesel cost movements. Roland Bauer had agreed in the same sentence in which he had received the price. He had driven out to the Vogler gate on the morning of May 9th, 1979, in a 1978 silver Volvo station wagon with a small brown leather portfolio on the passenger seat and the folded contract inside it. The contract committed Eliza Vogeler to deliver 1,800 acres of custom spring plowing and 1,800 acres of custom fall plowing per year to the North Seed Cooperative member farmers across Cass and Trail counties at a base price of $42 per acre. The annual revenue at full delivery would be $151,200. The contract was a 5-year exclusive arrangement. Eliza read the contract 3 times. She wrote 2 questions in pencil in the margin. She asked Roland Bauer the 2 questions. He answered both clearly. She signed the contract at 1:18 in the afternoon of May 9th, 1979. Roland Bauer drove back to Fargo that afternoon. The first custom plowing job began on the morning of May 12th, 1979. By the end of 1979, the Vogler operation was grossing approximately $163,000 annually against the Schoenfeld diesel tractor operation's projected zero. Eliza expanded the working team from 8 horses to 12 in the autumn of 1979 through 3 additional Percheron-Belgian purchases from Augustin Brower's son Wilfred in Stearns County. She hired Henry Bauernfeld full-time as the operation's senior teamster. She hired 2 additional part-time teamsters for the custom plowing crew. She began selling foundation Percheron-Belgian breeding pairs to other small-scale farmers in 1980 at a price of $300 per pair. The 1980 breeding stock sales generated an additional $16,000 in revenue. By the autumn of 1980, the operation was running a working team of 14 draft horses. The original 240-acre home wheat operation, the 1,800-acre spring custom plowing route, and the 1,800-acre fall custom plowing route. Lyle Schoenfeld drove over to the Vogler farmhouse on a cold Saturday afternoon in late November 1980. The 1980 custom plowing year had been a record. The 1980 farm crisis was beginning to deepen across the upper Midwest. He parked his truck at the gate. He walked through. He walked across the gravel yard to the upper draft horse barn door. He looked in through the open door. He saw the rows of hand-built oak feed troughs, the heritage Percheron-Belgian draft horses settling into the deep wheat straw bedding for the evening, the row of hand-oiled brown leather working harnesses hanging on wooden pegs above the stalls. He looked back at Eliza, who had walked out from the kitchen with a small tally book in her arm. He took off his faded red International Harvester ball cap. He set it against his chest. Eliza. Lyle. I have been thinking about Marcus. I have been thinking about what I should have said in October of 1972 when you walked the first 4 Percheron-Belgians off the borrowed stock trailer. I am here to tell you that I know it now. I should have known by the autumn of 1975, when your spring-planted hard red spring wheat came in at 43 bushels and mine came in at 39. I did not know because I am the kind of man I am. I am not asking forgiveness. I am asking if I can come stand at this gate one Saturday afternoon a season and learn what I should have learned in 1972. Eliza unlatched the gate. She held it open. She said, "Lyle, you are forgiven. You were forgiven on the night Eleonora sent you over here in October of 1972. You did not need to come today. I did need to come today, Eliza. Then come walk the south pasture." He came in. He walked the south pasture with her for an hour. He looked at the 14 Percheron-Belgian draft horses grazing scattered across the late autumn alfalfa stubble. He took the small tally book from Eliza's hands. He read 3 pages of her 1980 plowing route entries. He gave the book back. He drove home at dusk. The next Saturday, he came back. The Saturday after that, he came back. By the end of November 1980, he had come back 4 Saturdays in a row. The Saturday visits became, in the Schoenfeld and Vogler families, a thing that was understood and not discussed. They continued until Lyle Schoenfeld's death in 1999. Lyle Schoenfeld learned on those Saturday afternoons the things he had refused to learn for 7 years. He learned that the 4-horse traction protocol on the Saxon tradition harness fit could pull a 4-bottom horse-drawn moldboard plow at approximately 1 3/4 acres per hour on the heavy Red River Valley black-loam soil. He learned that the 8-horse expanded team could pull the same plow at approximately 3 1/2 acres per hour. He learned that a working team of 8 Percheron-Belgian draft horses on the standard 10-hour spring planting day could plow approximately 35 acres against a 120 horsepower diesel tractor's approximately 40 acres on the same day at the same depth at approximately 40% of the operating cost per acre. He learned that the draft horse traction protocol did not depend on a diesel fuel supply chain, did not depend on a regional international harvester or John Deere part supply network, did not require seasonal capital outlays for new diesel implements every 6 to 8 years, and produced no documented carbon emissions externalities. He learned, finally, that he had been wrong about everything, and that the woman who had been right was the same woman whose late husband he had hoped to inherit a 240-acre Red River Valley operation from. He told his wife Eleonora, on the Saturday evening of November 29, 1980, after walking the south pasture for the 4th consecutive Saturday, that he was going to revise his will, to leave the 160 acres adjacent to the Vogler east boundary to Eliza Vogeler at no cost in the event of his death, so that the Vogler operation could expand the 4-horse team route without ever having to negotiate an arm's-length real estate transaction with his estate. Eleonora Schoenfeld had set down her sewing. She had said, "Lyle, that is the first decent thing I have heard come out of your mouth since the night I sent you over there in October 1972. He had said, "Eleonora, I am trying to deserve to call her my friend." He had revised the will the following week. The 160 acres transferred to the Vogler operation in 1999. The Fargo Forum ran a feature in its November 28, 1980 edition under the headline, "The 4-horse team that plowed through the crisis." The article was 13 column inches on the front page and continued for 16 more inside. Henry Bauernfeld was quoted. He said, I worked beside Mrs. Vogler for 8 years. I knew the four-horse team was right by 1975. I should have spoken up then. I am sorry I waited until the parts ran out. Otto Brouwer was quoted. He had bought heritage wheat seed off Wilhelm Vogler in the 1950s. He said, "I knew Wilhelm. I knew his father Augustin. I bought a pair of Percheron geldings off Augustin Vogler in 1946, and they pulled 140 acres of mine for 19 consecutive seasons until I sold them in 1965 when I bought the Alice Chalmers. I will say this once. The granddaughter is what the grandfather was, and what the grandfather was the smartest teamster in 3 Saxon American counties. I am sorry I did not say so in 1972. Lyle Schoenfeld was quoted. He said, "I owe my neighbor's widow my respect. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve to call her my friend." Dr. Margaret Strand at North Dakota State University was quoted. She said, "We have known about the Vogler operation since the spring of 1976. Mrs. Vogler asked us to keep her name out of the literature. We did. We are no longer going to. The Vogler operation is the foundation of Upper Midwest alternative traction wheat economics documentation in the United States. It is, as far as we have been able to measure, the lowest operating cost per acre commercial wheat operation in the documented Red River Valley small farm economic literature. It has been quietly run for 7 years by a single Cass County widow on 4 draft horses her grandfather wrote about in a Saxon manual in 1873. The article noted in its final paragraph that the Vogler operation had been the only Cass County commercial wheat operation to plant its entire acreage on the standard April 15th, 1979 window. That the Vogler operation had signed a 5-year custom-plowing contract in May 1979 with the North Seed Cooperative, covering 1,800 acres of spring and 1,800 acres of fall plowing per year at $42 per acre, and that the North Dakota Department of Agriculture had filed a formal request with the United States Department of Agriculture to recognize a permanent annual Upper Midwest Sustainable Traction Foundation Award category in honor of the 1979 Vogler certification. The article did not note, because Eliza Vogeler had not told the reporter, that the hand-bound 1873 Saxon-German agricultural manual her great-grandfather had carried west from Großenhain to Stearns County in 1882 was still in use in the Vogler kitchen pantry in 1980, that the hand-restored 1888 4-bottom horse-drawn moldboard plow had been the operational foundation of every spring planting on the Vogler home place since 1973, and that the 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses Eliza had walked off the borrowed stock trailer in October of 1972 had been the foundation of every pulled furrow of authentic 4-horse team agriculture produced in the Red River Valley for the next decade. By the spring of 1990, the Vogler operation had become the foundation reference case in the rapidly expanding American draft horse traction restoration movement. 68 working Upper Midwest and Plain States and Pennsylvania Amish heritage draft horse operations had adopted variations of the Vogler 4-horse team protocol between 1980 and 1995. 18 of those 68 operations had themselves gone on to be recognized in the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program founded under the 1985 Farm Bill. the North Dakota Department of Agriculture established in 1991 a permanent North Dakota Sustainable Traction Foundation Award named for the late Augustine Vogler. North Dakota State University established in 1994 a small-scale draft horse traction certificate program with Dr. Margaret Strand as its founding director. Henry Bauernfeld stayed with the operation for the rest of his working life. Theodore Vogler earned his degree in agronomy from North Dakota State University in 1984 and returned to the home place in 1986 to take on the home acreage management side of the operation, while his mother focused on the custom-plowing routes and the breeding stock program. Theodore Vogler married a Fargo agricultural economist named Greta Lindstrom in 1991. They had 2 daughters. The younger daughter, born in 1996 and named Matilda in honor of her great-great-grandmother, learned to drive a 4-horse hitch at the age of 11. She is, as of this filming, the 5th generation of Vogler women to keep a working Saxon tradition 4-horse draft team on a working farm going back to the Großenhain family farm in central Saxony in the autumn of 1848. Eliza Vogeler did not explain why she chose the protocol, not because the why was hidden. The why had been sitting in a Saxon farmhouse kitchen in 1882 when her grandfather Augustin had packed a hand-bound 1873 agricultural manual into a carved oak box to carry west to Stearns County, Minnesota. And again, on the porch of a Cass County farmhouse in 1944, when her father had taught her at the age of 4 to repeat the words, "Granddaughter, when the diesel tractor parts run out, the day will come when our family will need the 4-horse team again." She farmed the home place for 22 more years. She ran the Norse Seed Cooperative Custom Plowing contract from 1979 through 2002, renewing the original 5-year contract 4 times. By the end of her career, the Vogler operation had grown to a working team of 26 Percheron-Belgian draft horses, the original home acreage plus the inherited adjacent 160 acres, the 1,800-acre spring and 1,800-acre fall custom plowing routes, and a working breeding program that supplied foundation pairs to 68 working draft horse operations across the upper Midwest, the Plain States, Pennsylvania Amish Country, and Central Ohio. The Norse Seed Cooperative is still in business today, run by Roland Bauer's daughter, Astrid. The 1873 Saxon-German Agricultural Manual is now on display at the North Dakota State University Agricultural Engineering Department Library in Fargo. $480, 4 Percheron-Belgian draft horses, a Saxon teamster's granddaughter. The animals nobody wanted in the hands of the woman nobody understood until they saw what a 106-year-old Saxon draft horse traction tradition would do when the diesel tractor parts ran out on the upper Midwest. If you have ever raised an animal everybody told you was the wrong one for your county, leave a comment below telling us what it was. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe and ring the bell. There is one of these stories in every county in America. We are working through them, one harvest at a time.